Well, good morning. My name is Gene. I'm one of the pastors here at GCC, and we're at the last Sunday of the year. 2015 is almost behind us, and so it's befitting. It's good for us to look back. It's good for us to think about what 2015 was or wasn't for us. And when I considered where we've been in 2015, we said, see you later to a few of our friends here at GCC Elkhart. Guys that have been, they've been here since day one, I think. Roger Sullivan and Dave Jenkins, both stalwarts in the church here, and just been very impactful with their lives. They've given so much of their time and resources, and we said goodbye to them this past year. Additionally, we invited 5 new staff members to join our team here in Elkhart. Many of you have looked at my blog, genetroyer.com, and you've seen the news there. But just in case you haven't, I'll recap. So we had Emily Hicks that joined our team as the administrative assistant. Lori Beecher and Kathy Allen both joined the children's staff. Pete Tarwacki, who you just met, he is our creative arts director. And then starting this week, Jordan Kearns is our brand new director of student ministries here at the Elkhart campus. And so we welcomed them this year, and we're extremely happy to be able to build our team the way we have. Interesting note, our children's department, we've been running 90-some kids. I don't know what the numbers are today, but we went from the low 90s to the mid-90s to the high 90s to over 100, and then 2 weeks ago we had 130. And so the challenge there is to keep up with that growth, but it's a challenge that all churches in America would like to have. So we're embracing it, and we'll continue to invite you to join the kids team as they minister to our kids. At the end of our time this morning, we will again have an opportunity to give, and all of this, everything that's happened in 2015, the great progress we've made, is due largely, in part, to your generosity. And so as we finish out the year, we hope to finish it out strong. And our goal for our Christmas offering here in Elkhart is $60,000. And you'll have an opportunity to give again towards that end at the end of the service. So we're closing out the year with the Unexpected series. And it makes me want to ask, how has Jesus shown up unexpected in your life in 2015? Has he appeared in ways that you weren't expecting? For me, I think so in many ways. He's appeared in ways I wasn't expecting, and I'm still discovering, and I'm still processing that. We started out the year, if you remember, with the Walking Dead series. We built this it's a platform now, but it was a bridge in January of last year. We had about 40 people walk from this side of the bridge, signifying death, to this side, signifying life. So they walked from death to life. And so at the end of the year now, we're ending the year with a couple stories. There are stories of the lives of people right here, part of this church. And we'll hear how God has entered the fray in the mess of our lives. So I just spent a couple days in Florida with my father. He is 78 years old. He just had a birthday. And he has been a carpenter. He's been in construction. He's been in manufacturing all his life. And so it's been hard on his body, right? And over the years I've watched as he no longer takes the strong strides that he used to, but Dad is shuffling. He's shuffling along and due in part to the hard work that he's put in all his life. So now he goes to Florida and he shuffles boards and he plays checkers to keep his mind sharp. But as I spent time with Dad again, I was again reminded of how much he loves me. His love has never waned for me. There have been times when his instruction was ignored by me. There have been times when I've made decisions that he didn't agree with. But I never, ever, ever doubted his love for me. There were times when I was a kid when, the infraction of the moment required his hand to my behind. And he straightened me out pretty quick that way. But I never questioned his love. He disciplined me, but I always knew that my dad loved me, that he valued me, that there was no stopping anything that he would do anything for me. There was just no stopping that. Now, the reason I'm using that illustration is because at least 12 times in the Bible, we read where God is referred to as the refining fire. He's referred to as the refining fire. His relationship with us is one of continuous refinement. And as we think about the coming of Jesus, as we think about really the initiating love of God to us, God's reaching to us. He's sending us Jesus. He's initiating his love, and he's refining us in the process. Sometimes he has to refine us because that's the only way he's going to extract some of the beauty that's within us. It's the only way he's going to extract it out of us. Now, the Bible is very clear that we're very valuable to God. There's no question about our value to God, just like there's no question about our value to my dad. But I often wonder, we have such great value. He sends Jesus to die for us, to shed his blood for us. He sent Jesus from heaven to earth to come as a baby so that we would be redeemed. And yet, his value on us is lost on us sometimes, isn't it? We treat ourselves so cheaply. We figure our actions don't really matter that much. But God has ransomed us. He has reached down and he has given us life, real life. I'm going to turn to the book of Malachi. We're going to set the stage for this morning before we tell some stories. I'm going to set the stage, and we'll do so from the book of Malachi. It's the last book of the Bible, or the Old Testament, in Malachi 3. And it reads like this. And it's like God is, through Malachi, is pleading with his people to return. Pleading with his people and forecasting the coming of Jesus. So here's what it says. I will send my messenger who will prepare the way before me. Then suddenly the Lord you are seeking will come to his temple. The messenger of the covenant whom you desire will come, says the Lord Almighty. But who can endure the day of his coming? Who can stand when he appears? For he will be like a refiner's fire or a launderer's soap. Some versions say fuller's soap. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. He will purify the Levites and refine them like gold and silver. Then the Lord will have men who will bring offerings in righteousness, and the offerings of Judah and Jerusalem will be acceptable to the Lord, as in days gone by, as in former years. The people of Israel are looking for a Savior. They're looking. They've been oppressed. They've been in exile. Now they're out of exile. They're longing. They're yearning for their enemies to be pushed back to the fray and for God to establish his kingdom among them. That's what they're looking for. That's where their hopes are. And he says, it's coming. It's coming. The good is coming. The delightful things are coming. But then it takes a strange turn, and he says, but who can endure the day of his coming? So it's coming, but who can stand? Who can endure it? The object of your delight is on its way. The covenant's going to be fulfilled. Your enemies will be vanquished. For he, the coming Christ, is like a refiner's fire, like launderer's soap. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. He will purify the sons of Levi, noting that they're priests. He will purify the priests and refine them like gold and silver. And they will bring offerings in righteousness to the Lord. Then the offering of Judah and Jerusalem, and don't get hung up on that. That simply means the people of God, so you can just put yourself in there, will be pleasing to the Lord as in the days of old, as in the former years. The people of God in that time in history, the book of Malachi, in that time, they had been freed from Babylonian captivity. They'd been freed from slavery. Jerusalem had been reestablished. The temple had been built. And sacrifices to God had resumed. The people of God had grown complacent and cold toward God. So they were in captivity. We need God, we need God, we need God. Then they're out of captivity. And they got into this rhythm. People of God, including us, get into this rhythm of we need rescuing, we need redeeming, and we get it. And then the economy improves, our love life goes up and to the right, and all of a sudden, we don't need God as much again, because everything's good. And so we put a... It's like in our minds and in our culture, it's like, it used to be, well, Zephaniah speaks of this, when he says, God loves us and forgives us. He sings over us. He applauds us. All of that is true, right? All of that is true. But the deep and abiding love moves toward action, right? We don't just have all good things, God's really happy with us, and then just get lackadaisical in our spiritual life, right? We need to be moving. We need to move forward. Don't be half-hearted, because God is going to refine. He is jealous. God is a jealous God. He loves us. If you look at the children of Israel, they found themselves repeatedly in this cycle. Same one we find ourselves in sometimes. And in this process, God was at work. God was at work in the mess. God was at work even though the children of Israel weren't aware of it. Malachi reminds the people of God, our God is a refining fire. He will burn away impurities. He will wash away uncleanliness. J.I. Packer has this quote. He says, "Still he seeks the fellowship of his people and will send them as gifts both joy and sorrow, to detach their hands from the things of this world and to attach those things to himself." Packer's argument is that God so loves you, so longs to be with you, so longs to have a right relationship with you, and yet we're going to stumble until the day we die. But in our stumbling, we must be in single-hearted pursuit of him. He sends us joy and sorrow. I don't like that. I love the joy piece. I don't like the sorrow. I want to stay with the joy. But there are lots of things in this world that I love. There are lots of things that I'm tempted to make my God. There are lots of things that I'm tempted to be attached to. There are many things I'm tempted to give myself to. But God says, no, I'll send you joy. And then every once in a while, from time to time, I'm going to send you into the desert. I'm going to bring along circumstances in your life that help you refine, to be more like me, to put aside the things that have been for the things that will be. And unfortunately, the message is often, for me, I'm going to take you through the desert so you see how little control you have of your life. This morning, as Pete noted, we have a living room up here on the stage. I am probably feeling as out of control, as unscripted as I've ever been, and I don't like that. Just being honest. I'd prefer to know what's going to happen. But the conversations we'll have with our friends this morning is such that I believe that it'll go where it needs to go. And I'm trusting God, but I'm not comfortable with it, right? In 2001, a little bit about my story. There'll be some pictures showing up here on the screen in a second. But in 2001, I was on my way to my place of employment. And the little Acura over here met a minivan head-on. I was going down State Road 5 to my work. It was a large restaurant in Shipshewana. It was grand opening weekend, and a minivan coming the opposite direction swung over into my lane, and it was, I had to I'm told my skid marks were about 10 feet. But 55 to 60 miles an hour, we hit each other head on. And the result was that I was airlifted to Parkview Hospital in Fort Wayne. I never had a helicopter ride up to that point, and unfortunately I didn't remember that one either. But I got there, and I woke up, and Brenda was there. And that was really, really good, because my carotid artery was dissected, my ribs were broken, my lungs were punctured, my spleen was bruised, my liver was lacerated, and my right hip was broken. And I was out of control. In that moment, when I woke up, and it was the oddest sensation. If you ever felt like you're drowning, that's kind of what it felt like, I think. I've never felt like I was drowning, but that's what I imagine it to be, where I can't breathe. I just can't get my breath. And at the same time, there's excruciating pain everywhere in my body. I was out of control, and I had a clear trajectory that I was on until that moment when the minivan hit me head on. At that moment, I no longer had control of my life. That was 14 years ago. And it was interesting as I was prepping for this, the emotions that I began to feel about this whole process. And when I thought about how much God has loved me and loved me in those moments in ways that I didn't expect. We had friends that came and community that just surrounded us. We were absolutely surrounded with love and community in those days. And then, you know how God sometimes brings things into our life and we're in the desert and then He takes us further on into the desert till we can't see the other side? Well, on November the 19th, that happened on October the 12th, on November the 19th, I lost my job. And Brenda and I had made decisions about how we would live based on our income. And now we're sitting there looking at each other going, okay, I'm in a wheelchair. And I'm also fired from my position that I had. And let me just, a side note, say that the people that let me go in 2001 are my friends today. We're friends. It took a while. It took a while. But we're not enemies. We're friends. And in retrospect, many of the things that have happened to me in my life, and many of the things that have happened to you in your life, if you look back, you see where God moved over the course of time, and you realize, I realize, that I wouldn't be here today had it not been for what happened in October and November of 2001. God is in the refining process. He's in the transforming work. And it's in that work that we sometimes, it is overwhelming. And my tendency and your tendency, I think, is simply to say, I got this, I got this, I got this, until we ain't got it no more. Right? We try to hang on. We try to do it. We try to do it all. Until God says, wait a second. I need you to need me. I need you to depend on me. Because my way is the better way. Brenda and I went through a process of forgiveness because of the pain that was exerted on us through these circumstances. And did you know that there are levels of forgiveness? Sometimes we think we've forgiven. Brenda and I thought we'd forgiven what had happened, right? And then within the first 6 months after this accident, one of my former employers walks into our church in the middle of a worship service, and all of a sudden we realize that not only did we feel a lot of pain from them, I remember Brenda saying afterwards, she said, I just asked God, do we have to share our church with them too? There was another level of forgiveness that needed to happen. And again, I would just say, we're friends with these people today. But in those days, forgiveness is what, it was like an onion. When you peel an onion, they come off in layers, and there's a layer of forgiveness, and done with that. No, now there's another circumstance where there's another layer of forgiveness that has to happen. I don't know if we're done forgiving in this, I think we are. But then I thought we were before as well. That it turns out that there's more to be done because there's more to be done in us. This wasn't for the people that had hurt us. That forgiveness wasn't for them, it was for us. It was for Brenda and I. It was for us to go through this exercise of understanding that God is at work in us, in the mess, in the middle of it all. God's at work in us. So fast forward, now it's 2011 or 2012. And we're in this book study here. On a Wednesday night, there's a study here in the auditorium here. We're sitting around tables. And I've known Don Reynolds, right? Don Reynolds used to be, he was our creative arts director. He's now with the Granger campus. But he was our Elkhart campus creative arts director for a long time. And I saw him on the stage, and that was about it. I didn't really know him. But we got together we were sitting at the same table on this first night of this study. And so we just got acquainted. I said, hey, Don, my name's Gene. Got his background, and it turns out that his dad owned and started a business in Shipshewana. And I said, really, Don? And you used to work there? And he said, yeah, I used to work there. And he said, well, when did you work there? Did you work there in October of 2001? You know where I'm going with this? He said, yeah, I was there. And I said, well, do you remember an accident that happened on October the 12th of 2001, right outside your front doors? And he said, yeah. He said, I prayed for that man. And I sat there in stunned silence. And I said, I'm that man. I'm the guy you prayed for. And all these years later, God gave me this gift of unexpected love from someone that I had no idea knew anything about me, from someone that didn't know me, frankly, until we connected. And he was able to share with me that he prayed for me in those moments. Unexpected love is given to us from Almighty God. And I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for the experiences. The pain was awful, and I don't want to go there again. But it's in that refining and that shaping process that I've grown. James 1 says, count it all joy. I love the word all there. It's just such an inclusive word. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. Various kinds. So what kinds of trials? Well, do you guys have a junk drawer at your house? At my house when I was growing up, I had one junk drawer. And it was like the best thing to go and see what's in that junk drawer. I think at last count we have 4 at our house now. So we've overdone it a little bit. But various kinds of trials and tribulations. God is in those. And it can be anything. It can be relational. It can be financial. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. Because in this we're tested. Your faith is tested. Your faith, testing of your faith produces steadfastness. I know that God knows me. And I know that when testing comes, it is for my strengthening. It is for the deepening of the roots of my life. For the expanding of the trunk of the tree that is my life. It is for my good. I know that. Sometimes, and I'll finish my part of it here with just saying that sometimes our attempt is to say yes to Jesus, and then we think that everything's peach keen, right? We're skipping and hopping all the way to eternity. That's just not the way it is. The reality of it is that we do go through trials. We go through circumstances in our lives that serve to shape us and mold us into the people that God really, really desires for us to be. We saw a video from the Schrock family, Jackson Schrock and his parents. Maybe it was just last week. Was it just last week? Yeah, last week we saw a video. Some of you weren't here, and so I've invited Adrian and Nicole Schrock, Jackson's parents, to come and just talk to us a little bit more about their story. And we're going to run the video in case you didn't see it. So we'll watch that now, and they'll come up.
Not the beautiful. He was taken away. I didn't get to hold him. I remember briefly them holding him by my face. But not the beautiful picture of holding your child and slightly crushing to your spirit to just continue to hear all these things that are wrong. And then you just kind of sit there and you're like, what? Like, what happens now?
When you're pregnant with your first child, you just expect the normal, right? Because that's what 90% of people go through. As we had appointments leading up to it, it became clear that it wasn't normal.
30 weeks they put me on bed rest, but I wouldn't say I truly believed anything was wrong with my child until the day that he was born.
Everything goes out the window. So we went from being in South Bend, delivering a baby, to 6 hours later, he's being flown down to Indianapolis.
Nephrology came in and told us about his single kidney that was in renal failure. You're just constantly getting like unexpected news, and you're sitting there going, wait, something else is wrong? daily occurrence in the NICU for like the first week.
Ultimately, we got a diagnosis that's called Vater syndrome, and what it is it's underdevelopment along your center line. Quickly learned that not everything is going to be like you want it to be. It was going to be lifelong. What does this mean for him growing and going to school and having friends and getting married and all of those sorts of things too? You know, you get to the next surgery, get to the next surgery, get to the next surgery, and then it's, okay, what's next?
He had his first surgery at day 2. He's had 18 surgeries over his first 8 years of life.
We knew early on that he was going to have a kidney transplant when he was first born, but he had to be a certain size and a certain weight to have a kidney transplant. And as he started to grow and get taller and bigger, his kidney function couldn't keep up. And early on when we got tested when he was 2 years old, we found out that I was a really good match for him. I mean, it really is a no-brainer when your son needs a kidney and you have it to give to him. I was going to do it. We knew it was going to be a long ordeal. We knew it was going to be about 6 weeks that we would be down in Cincinnati. I don't know that it really hit me until a week or two beforehand, like what was happening, that I would be going through surgery and, you know, I might not make it. And so you just start thinking about, what if this is the last time I see my kids? What if, you know, what if it doesn't go as planned?
I don't think I'll ever forget standing in the room where they sent you off to surgery. And they brought Adrian in to where Jack was waiting to go off to surgery. And I don't think I'll ever be able to put into words like that situation. I mean, I was sending off my husband and my child, and there was a chance that neither one of them were walking back out. So it's like you're literally like handing off your family members into God's hands and saying, I trust you. And you give them a hug and you give them a kiss and you send them off. And you watch them be wheeled away. Because at that moment, there's nothing else that you can trust other than trusting God that He's in control.
Jackson got a big kidney, and it came out on my left side, and it went into his right side, right here.
Adrian's doctor came in first and told us that he had successfully given up his organ. Jack, when he opened up his eyes and could see me and squeezed my hand for the first time, I was like, oh, you made it. You're on the other side. And we knew we had a big road ahead of us.
I was in terrible shape. Hard to get out of bed, getting around slow. It's hard to do things. And by day 2, he's up, jumping around on the bed and just ready to play and have a good time. They told us all these things that would be different, and they really were. Things like he had more energy. And right after the transplant, he tried all kinds of new things, and everything was just kind of a new world for him. It was so cool to see the transformation of what this gift could do for him and how it could change his life. The biggest surprise while we were in the hospital was Jackson developed an elevated blood pressure, ended up having a seizure.
He was playing with an iPad with my mom. He was like, Mommy, I think you need to get the nurse. He's like, I can't see Nana's iPad. So crazy how quickly he went from losing his sight to just watching his eyes start to twitch. We were rushed down for a CT scan. I knew that he'd been in his seizure for way too long. And so in the back of my head, I had all the fears, his vision's not gonna come back. His speech, he'd lost his speech by that he couldn't talk to us. Pushing those fears aside, and I'm gonna have faith that I'm gonna have my little boy back when this is over. And I remember praying, God, he can come out of this, he can go through this and still come out on the other side, the exact same little boy that went into this seizure. And you're in control of that. I got to sit and hold Jack's hand while he was in the machine. And they said you can talk to him, we don't know if he can hear you and I just kept sitting there saying, Jack, you're okay. I know this machine's really loud, but you're gonna be okay. And it was in the time that I had that God just give me a sign he's gonna be okay. And Jack squeezed my fingers and I was like, do that again. And he squeezed him again. And it was just in that moment, I was like, yes, God has this. God has my son, he's holding By the time we got back to the room, Adrian was there. I was standing at the foot of Jack's bed, and Adrian was up by his head. Adrian started to pray, and Jack hadn't verbalized anything to that point. He was trying to talk to us, but we couldn't understand what he was saying. And I can't tell you today what he said, but he audibly, very clearly started to pray for himself. And those words in the prayer were clear. And that was just another sign. God gave us so many signs. And then from that point on, his speech came back and his eyesight started to come back.
There's definitely moments along the way where you ask questions like, why? Why is this happening? Why something else? Why more? Hasn't it been enough?
I remember at the beginning of all of Jack's surgeries, being angry. God's really taken me on a journey through the process of just understanding definitions in his word so differently. Jack is perfect in God's eyes. Jack is the testimony to the amazing work that God can do. And so many people have come to know Christ because Jack's walked through their life.
You expect a kid who's going to have to go through 18 surgeries just to be discouraged and frustrated, and totally has not been that. He's been strong and brave, and we've always had fun along the way. He's so much stronger than you think a little kid can be. You force yourself sometimes to just be thankful.
The unexpected is easier to deal with when God's in the mix, because you know he wants the best for you. We choose to embrace our situation, to embrace our process, to embrace the unexpected.
This is a gift, and you've got him to enjoy for a little bit, so make the most of it.
I talked to God before my surgery. I asked him to make me and Daddy be brave.
What a story that is. One that, well, I asked them to come up here because I know that in the middle of a pretty video, sort of pretty, there's a lot of things that look really nice on the video. And yet I know that in the middle of stress, Brenda and I have never had a sick child like you've had. And so I can't imagine the level of stress that is in place with you guys. I mean, you're married, you're working through all of this. How many years were you married before Jackson was born?
Year and a half, 2.
So you didn't have a lot of time until you were thrust into this unexpected situation. So what's the story behind the story? What are the things that you've learned or experienced that maybe didn't make it onto the video that you think might be good for us to hear?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there was a lot just early on, and nothing was expected. So Nicole was in, and she was on bed rest for 5 weeks beforehand, and life changed even then. And thankfully, people rallied around us and helped take care of our house and take care of our food. And no, it was really amazing. And that's been the way the whole way along, is that God has put people in our lives to help prop us up and help us get through it. And the first couple of years it's hard, but it's not as hard as when all of a sudden you have another kid.
Yeah.
And then you got to take care of Jackson, and then Emily comes along, and then you have another one. And so we have 2 little girls who we're trying to be great parents to them too. I say great.
How have you managed that? Because when Jackson is in the spotlight and he has all the, everything's kind of geared towards him, how have you managed parenting when that's the circumstance? I mean, it's difficult enough when you have 2 kids, like we did, that neither one of them requires more attention than the other necessarily. Well, Cody did.
We always do, Cody, as middle children. Don't worry, you're not alone. That's been something that's been really difficult for me in the last few years. The realization of how much Jack's beginning and where I was at when I birthed my second child. God thought I was ready, but I didn't think I was ready. I was very fearful. I didn't want to be pregnant. My control said, I can't control this. I can't take care of 2 kids. I can't do this well, so I don't want to try. And it was the beginning of God showing me that when He's in control, you can give it to Him, we can make it through. But at the time, when Avonlea was a baby, I wouldn't say that I went through a lot of depression. Postpartum could be tagged to that, but just regular depression. It was too much to handle on my own. There's breakdowns when you're in that state of communication between your husband and you. There's, at some points, times when you just set your child down and walk away. And then fast forward, I think that we went through this last surgery with Jack, and the girls, we had people rally around us and volunteer and say, we'll watch your kid, they can stay with us. When I was like, I don't want to burden somebody else with, if you've met my daughter, Taya, who's 3, she's a little rambunctious. She's full of spirit. And if you haven't seen her, you'll see her. She'll bolt through the hallway after service. She takes a lot of work. And having your 2 children, you want to be the one that shows up to take care of them. And I was torn. I was like, how do I do both jobs at the same time? And I feel like God's done surgery not only on Jackson, but surgery on our family, where our communication breakdowns have occurred. He's told us He's there with us. He's willing to work through those. He's willing to work on that and make it better if we're willing to hand it over. Same with my children. If you're willing to hand them over to the people I've given you that are willing to rally around you, I got this. I will take care of them. There are things we're walking through with our girls. There's things we're walking through with each other that are painful. When you said peeling an onion, I'm like, I'm not sure that's painful enough. But it's true. Sometimes those layers come off really quickly. Sometimes they take a long time and create a lot of tears. That's the vision in my head of peeling an onion.
Right.
But when God's in it, and He's taught me that my job in that all is not to try to control it or fix it. It's to seek Him and trust in what His Word says, that He's got it. And in the meantime, He's doing surgery on me at the same time. And the idea of that refining fire. And yeah, it's beautiful, but painful at the same time.
What I love is that this is not something that has a pretty pink bow on it. It is still very much in process. And is there anything else you want to say to us in the closing? Is there anything else that you've learned that you think someone here ought to hear about? If not, I just want to say that I think the church family here, I recall, when did Jackson have his surgery? Adrian?
August 18th.
Okay. I recall the Sunday before, I think it was, or the Sunday when you left, that we were able to stand with you and anoint both Adrian and Jackson with oil that morning, and just the investment that you've made in us, and we've been able to return back to you has been it's been a beautiful thing to see. And again, it's that the beauty in the middle of the refining. And had you not walked through these doors, however long it's been, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to share this story and for you to talk to all of us this morning. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of you, those of you that have stepped up and helped us in all sorts of ways. We so appreciate the community that's gathered around us. not something you can do without that community. So thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so that's story number 2. Story number 3, I'm going to ask Jim and Judy Baker to come up with me, and we'll hear their story, which is a beautiful story as well, and it doesn't have a bow on it yet either, but it's coming, right? So a couple, well, it was the first week of the Unexpected Love series, or the Unexpected Christmas series. I was talking to someone after the service up here, and I saw Judy and several of her friends with Jim behind her were coming forward, and I saw Judy was she was crying, and Jim was crying, and I thought, well, that's unusual. I hope they're okay. And so I finished my conversation, and I looked over to my right, and the word multitude comes in my mind every time I tell this story, because it looked, in my brief glance over, it looked like there were lots of people around them praying for them. And so I left that, and I went on to do what I needed to do. And I'm standing out in the lobby the next week, and Judy says, "Gee, did you hear what happened?" And so Judy's going to tell you that. You hear me?
I have not been the same person since that day. It started about a year ago. This is our little story about a big touch from God. It started about a year ago. I was having signs of dementia at 61 years old. My doctor noticed it. I started going through a series of tests, and the outcome was not good. They put me on some medication that did help a great deal. The second weekend of this past November, Jim and I were out in the yard raking leaves, and I didn't realize it, but I had stepped off the curb onto the leaves, and not realizing I had stepped off the curb, when I went to step back, I fell backwards. Now, this was not a hard fall. It was as if I went down in slow motion. I got up to see if any of the neighbors had watched me fall. I felt like an idiot. And I kind of chuckled and got up, and I seemed okay. The next 4 weeks that followed, the 3 to 4 weeks that followed, was a mental decline. It was just like I was losing my verbal skills. Couldn't think of the right words to say, and I was crying out to everything but God. Now, just to go back, a year ago when I first started on this dementia medication, I asked God to help me, and I prayed. I felt nothing. And I don't know if you've ever felt that before. And I prayed and still just felt like he was too busy with everybody else and didn't have time for me. I just felt like I was one of millions. So as I was going through this, Jim said that I was walking around the house like a space cadet, and I just started withdrawing from people. I didn't feel that I was depressed, but I felt fear, like fear had just overcome my whole being. On my job, I'm supposed to be on the phone all day. I got up one morning after Thanksgiving, went back to work. I work from home, went into the office, and I couldn't figure out how to turn on my computer. I'm sorry, every time I tell this, it just starts all over again. I couldn't figure out how to turn on my computer. I knew I had a lot of stuff to do that day on my job, but I couldn't figure out where it was at, what I was supposed to do, and when I was supposed to do it. The keyboard on the computer just seemed over, I didn't know what to do. And I guess I finally figured it out, but those next 3 to 4 days were just a blur. I later found out that I was calling the wrong people on the wrong day, giving the wrong information to the wrong people, but God was still in control. Totally unexpected. Fast forward, Sunday morning, Jim, we got up and he says, let's go to church. I didn't want to have any part of it. I didn't even want to come here. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want anybody to see me like this. I wasn't making sense. So Jim kind of coached me like he normally does. And I came and I started telling my good friend Debbie Stone about what I had been going through. And she said, Judy, I'm going to pray for you. And I knew beyond a doubt that she would. I normally am not a crying person, and my prayer life, I'm just going to tell you, has never been. I've always struggled with prayer. But I didn't realize what God had in store for me. After church, after not crying for all these years, after 61 years, I just began crying. I cried that Friday. I cried that Saturday. I told Jim, I said, I just feel like you're losing me. And I felt like I was losing myself. Until you ever feel like you're losing your mind, it's just an overwhelming feeling. It's just not to be able to do the things or think of the things that you know that you're normally supposed to be able to do. So we came to church. I cried all during church. Well, I didn't cry all during church. I didn't cry through Mark Beeson's message. And although I really can't remember what he said in that message, it went right to my soul. Even though it didn't go to my mind, it went straight to my soul. And it was just what I needed. After church, I was at that end. Debbie was down at this end, and she just started waving for me to come to the middle aisle. I didn't know what she wanted, but it just seemed like I was in a slow marathon. It seemed like from that end to that end was about a mile long, and it seemed like it took me forever. But I remember I couldn't wait to get to her. When I got to her, she just kind of took me in her arms and says, we're going to go up to the prayer team. And I was just crying my eyes out. I came up front, and they asked no questions, and that's when everybody began to pray. And there were different hands. I could tell that, different people that was praying was laying hands on me and saying an individual prayer. But there was one hand that was different than all the others. And when I felt that hand, is when I felt this sensation that started at the top of my head. And it just started, it was like a wave that went down through all of my body. It's like it went through every vessel, every cell, and every organ. And I felt it go all the way to the bottom of my feet. And I still didn't know what had happened. And I through all that crying and praying, I'm standing up there going, what's going on? What's happening? So the prayer was over, and I shared with him how I had been just gripped with fear about losing my mind. I also shared that I had a live radio show to do the following morning for the credit union that I work for. I didn't know how I was going to get through it. We walked out the door, we met with Gene at the back, and I was still, pretty shook up, and Gene put his arms around us, and we said, asked us if we were okay, and we said yes, but I knew he wasn't convinced.
That's true.
So we walked on outside, got in the car, and you hear about these movies and these pictures where you see this big hand of God come out of the sky and it's pointing at you. Well, I felt like God did that to me, only he took his finger and thumped me on the forehead. And in an instant, totally unexpected, it hit me. Judy, you were just touched by God in there. You've experienced a healing. And once I acknowledged it, and I knew what had happened, it was like the heavens just opened up. And it was like this beam just came from heaven right down on me. And people, every time I get to this point and I try to explain, I try to find the words, there are no words for what I felt in those next few minutes. Peace and love is what comes to me, but wow, if that's even just a little taste of what heaven is going to be like, it was indescribable. And I've never been the same since. I'm clearly thinking I went to work that Monday and I've been functioning. I got an email from the CEO. He says, Judy, you nailed that radio show. It was the best one I had done in 3 years. And even all this time while they were praying for me up here, Jim was over to the side because he was just worried sick, watching me just slowly fade away. And he felt that same sensation that I did, that same peace, that same love. And you know, how has this changed? Nothing is the same. We are not even the same people. I don't know how, well, I do know. Things don't look the same. When I come in contact with people, the first thing I think about is, how can I serve them as a servant? What can I do to help them? It's just nothing is the same. We watched the movie War Room. And you know, one thing that I have learned from that is I am sick and tired of Satan claiming the lives of our friends and our family. I've had enough of it. And just like that lady did in the war room, Satan has no place in our lives, our home, our friends, and our family. I've had enough of it. I'm claiming it for God. We have family members who are atheists. We called them a couple nights ago. Jim's sister's in her 70s, and she will tell you in a heartbeat she's an atheist. She does not believe in God. We shared our story with her. She broke down and cried and said, I know you guys. I know you don't make up stuff like this. She said, there has got to be a God. And she says, I've got to turn my life around. I'm hogging the microphone, but I wish everybody could experience it, because we're just not the same, and I just want to always hold on to it. I never want to lose that feeling of knowing God's presence. I had always felt His presence before, I just didn't know it. I was spiritually asleep. And people, we've got to wake up. We've got a job to do. And we've got to wake up and do what God wants us to do.
Good word, too.
Well, due to time restrictions, I want to say thank you all for joining us. To go back to where it all started, I believe, when she first was having problems on and off. Didn't think a lot about it at the time, because I had some of the same problems. You know, when you get older, you start forgetting things. But then we went to the neurologist, and he diagnosed her with mild dementia and put her on meds, and everything seemed to be okay for a while. But then like she said, it started deteriorating. And she works at home in the office, and I'm retired now, so we have paper-thin walls in the house. So I could hear her when she talks to her clients and everything, and sometimes the voices would start rising, and I wasn't hearing this anymore, so I knew something was changing. When it got to the point where she broke down and started crying, I knew something was wrong there, because this woman doesn't cry. So I'd been praying to God all along to help me understand what was going on. Give me wisdom, give me strength to deal with it. When the event happened here on Sunday, up here in front with the prayer team and all our best friends, a calmness came over me when two of my friends, Ken and Ben, took me aside after the initial prayer. And I didn't know at the time what had taken place with her, but I felt a calm come over me. And until we got out in the car and started talking about what happened, you know, neither one of us was aware of what happened to the other. It was all part of God's doing. I guess I could say blindsided us. We didn't see it coming. But what we've learned from all this, I think, is that we fell asleep. We've always had God in our hearts, and He has blessed us over and over during our life together. And I think when God blesses you, you're thankful and you praise Him, and it goes into a shoebox in the corner, and you forget about it, and you forget why it happened. But after the prayer meeting, it woke us up, and we look at life completely different now. And all I can say is praise the Lord for waking us up. I think all of us are in some sort of sleep stage. Some of us are nodding off every now and then. Some of us are just in a deep sleep. And we hope by sharing our story with everybody that you wake up. We all need it. To sum it up, I want to say to Gene, and all of us need to think about this too. We thank you for your leadership. Also, we want to thank you and Brenda for your friendship. It means the world to us. Yes. One last thing I want to say is a verse comes to my mind, Matthew 18:20, that really sums it all up for us. Where two or three gather in my name, I am there with them. And it just shows you the power of prayer. I'm glad we could share this story with you. Thank you.